to bind this, and I'm gonna pull it out of this Diane Rively. It's an 8x8 square by Ranger art journal. These are like cream colored mixed media pages. So I'm gonna actually cut this out because it's this kind of binding, and this is pretty chunky, and then I can just continue on using this. So I'm gonna bind this as its own journal. So I'm on this page is one that's the last one of a signature. So I'm gonna take my X-Acto and trim that out. But first, oops, I'm gonna clip this all so it's a little easier to work with because it's pretty chunky. It's hard because this paper wrinkles a lot. It's not really meant for as much water as I throw to it. So I'm just gonna take my blade and, excuse my head if you can see it, and go in here and just start cutting the binding without cutting in to the page. And every little part here, there's like a section where there's a stitch. So I'm just cutting the glued type binding and then coming and cutting the stitch. And you can see, there it is. So now I can turn it the opposite direction, and from here, pulled out, I can go in and cut the fabric. Voila! And now I can rebind this and continue on with using this part for something in the future. So now let's get this bound. So these pieces are from a Redwell. They are super heavy cardboard, and I'm going to use them for the base of my cover. So I am just measuring out what the internal pieces are and adding approximately a 1/2 inch to the cover, so it's slightly larger to the inside contents. And then I'm going to get that cut out, and I'm going to be using an X-Acto blade and a self-healing mat. I did try and use my corner rounder, but obviously it is way too lightweight to handle these corners. So I did end up buying a We Are Memory Keepers Big Bite, I think it's called, where you can do the corners, and it is more heavy duty. but I didn't get that to begin with. So I am just tracing the rounded corners from the inside pages and then cutting them out with some scissors. And now I've pulled out this really hot pink fabric, has lots of texture to it, and cutting down a piece to go along the bind edge. So I'm finishing off where that fabric and glue edge was on the original journal and covering it with this fabric. And I am, to tack that down, I am using one of my favorite glues, the Fabri-Tac. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cover panels and I'm going to get them gessoed. Adding gesso to these because I'm not quite sure how product will stick to the face of these. The paper it's created out of is kind of slick. So I want to make sure I have a good coat of gesso on it so everything sticks well to it. And then I have decided to use some of my rigid wrap. It's a plaster cloth. I really enjoy using it for covers. You can get some awesome textures. I will put a link up in the upper right hand corner with an iCard to a video where I did the cover of an A to Z book of textures. And you can see the making of that cover using the same cloth. So I'm just getting the front, and I will also do the back cover covered in this plaster cloth. I'm not bringing it over onto the back side. I'm just doing the front side of each of the covers. The way the cloth works is you saturate it with water for just a couple of seconds, and then once it's saturated, you lay it onto your surface and then rub it in, and that kind of activates and moves some of that plaster to fill in the gaps. I have used this where I haven't rubbed it in as much. I did have some problems with it adhering, but it's something that you could overcome if you really wanted to see a lot of that texture of those sheets. So now that both of these have dried thoroughly, I'm going to go in and get some gesso onto the surface of both of the covers. I just want to make sure whatever I throw at it sticks. All right, I'm coming in with a Stencil Girl stencil and some TCW modeling paste, and I'm gonna push that through the stencil into the rigid plaster on the cover. Now you want to make sure you get your stencils cleaned off really well before you move on. And just on the side of caution, I am adding another layer of gesso over the top of that modeling paste before I move on. It's an adherence thing for me. I just want everything to adhere well because I do sell these, and yeah, it's important, I think. So I've gotten out some golden airbrush medium and some inks, and I'm just putting a layer of that airbrush medium on the surface because I really like how the inks respond with it. So I'm going in with this Liquitex ink and then just getting it to move around and catch in some of the texture. And then I'm going to add a little bit of water to get it to really flow and move and spread out. And just go from there with all that gorgeousness all over the surface. And now that that's dry, I'm going to come back in with a second layer of that ink and just play to get some areas to really pop. I didn't really want to spray more water and have it like splatter, so I tried to come in with just the tip of the water sprayer, but that didn't work, so I chose to come in with a water brush and to try and fan out the ends of those bright contrasted areas. And now I'm going to do something similar with the back side. So now I'm going to come in and do a little bit of shading around the edges, and I'm just using some Payne's gray that has been made into more of a fluid with the mixed with airbrush medium, and I'm just finger brushing that on. You'll see I'm going to go in with a couple coats just to get until I decide on how dark I really want that to be along the edges. So now I'm coming in with my ruler, my owl, my awl, and I use a piece of cork in the back to go into when I'm puncturing holes, but I'm putting in holes along the bound edge because I am going to do like a faux saddle stitch almost down that edge, the bound edge, on both my cover and on my front cover and my back cover. So I've decided to show you this in regular speed, what I'm doing. I'm going through the bottom, so the inside of the front cover, through to the front, crossing it over and going into the next hole, pulling that through, keeping my thumb through to make a loop, taking my needle and crossing it over through the first part that I did, and then tightening it, and it creates this little V, which is kind of like a faux saddle stitch. And I'm doing that the whole way up this edge. This is the bound edge. And on the final one, I'm going back through that same hole and creating the same kind of stitch. I'm just going through one hole twice at the end. Then I'm going to bring it over the back, tie it off, and tape it to the back of the front cover. And I'm going to repeat this same process on the back cover. So my next process is to apply some gesso to the inside of the front and the inside of the back cover. And then I'm going to adhere the contents of the journal to the front and back covers. And I'm going to be using some Yes paste to do this because it's pretty secure stuff. It's like a super heavy gel. They call it a glue stick in a tub, and it seriously is. Also, I could have used E6000 or any super heavy gel. So I'm going to get that cover really good and covered with the paste, and then I'm going to apply it to the last page of the journal. So this is the back cover. And I am going to literally stick that last blank page of the contents of the journal to that back panel. And I'm going to do the same thing to the front cover. And I'm just going to line them up and then go through a slightly wet cloth and make sure there's no Yes paste that got onto that page. My trusty little clothespins to make sure that that gets significantly attached, nothing pops up. So now I'm going to do basically the same exact thing to the front cover and get that attached, and then clip it and let it dry. So my next process, I don't usually show this, but I think it's important. I do spray all the pages with a UV varnish, and I usually do one page, let it dry overnight, do it a second time, let it dry, and go through and do each of the pages in that same method. And then I go over them with Dorland's wax. Now, Dorland's wax is a medium that will just keep the pages from sticking to each other. And that, for me, is how I finish a journal off prior to selling it. Listed below is a supply list of all the products that I've used. Some of them you'll notice have links next to them. They might be links to either my Etsy store if it's a product I carry, or possibly an affiliate link. The way affiliate links work, if you're unfamiliar with that, is I can receive a small compensation if you purchase something using one of those links. There is never any additional cost to you to use the links.